I think what really makes this scene is Nicolas Cage, and he's really badass.
Anyone who can escape from Satan is a badass by definition.
Hi, I'm Paul Worsey, and I'm a professor of explosives engineering.
And I'm Tassilo Baur, a special effects supervisor in Los Angeles. And we're back for part 2.
And we're going to look at even more explosions from TV and films from a scientific perspective.
And a filmmaking perspective. Let's look at some clips. Mission Impossible.
Stick of gum, right?
No.
No. You mash them together. Just don't chew it.
So, why don't we quietly get out of here onto a plane? Just want to make
There isn't really any explosive that small a piece would have that much of an effect on people. There's only a certain amount of chemical energy in an explosive. For just a few grams, there's no way you can get that sort of effect.
You mash them together.
We do have a lot of two-component explosives that we actually use. In this case, it's probable the gum would be explosive, and then the two colors would be two ingredients, and when those were mixed together, that would cause an exothermic reaction, which means puts up a lot of heat. The explosive would then be heat sensitive and would fire. As far as the CIA is concerned, they threw enough money at it and got the technical expertise. They could probably come up with something, but not as powerful as in the movie. You see the waiter just fly out of the scene as if there's a huge air blast that blows him out. But look, it doesn't even affect the tabletops and the linen on it. So that stuff's really good spec linen there.
From a filmmaking standpoint, well-constructed scene. With Ethan Hunt, we know he's got stuff up his sleeve, and we just want to see what it is he's going to pull out. And sure enough, it pays off, and it pays off huge. The breaking glass is created by a tempered glass, which is the type of glass you'd see in the side window of a car in the United States. It has a property of being very, very strong until any part of it is broken, in which case the whole thing shatters into tiny little pieces, which makes it very convenient for effects use. Similarly, when the waiter goes through the glass, you'll notice that the glass is broken before he hits it. Tempered glass, unbroken, is very, very strong, and he or she would bounce off it with injuries. If, on the other hand, the glass is broken, even if it's a fractions of a second before they hit it, the glass itself no longer has any structure to it, and they just fly through the fragments. And the reverse shot where you see Tom Cruise running away was probably done with dump tanks, and likely in anticipation of several takes, they would have wet down the whole plaza to avoid a possible continuity problem. Anytime you're going to cause something to get wet, something to get dirty, something to get dusty, if you can dust down or wet down the whole area ahead of time, it's to your advantage, because then you can do multiple takes without having a very time-consuming reset.
Whether or not you want to keep that in your pocket, that would be questionable. Technically, you could make it fairly safe, but this is explosive we're talking about. It doesn't matter how safe the explosive is, because a boom's a boom, and that's the dangerous part when it blows up. Drive angry. Now, Nicolas Cage has the shotgun from hell here.
Nicolas Cage is from hell here. That's the cool part.
Now, the question is would a shotgun actually set that off? And I think the answer to that is, yeah, it can do, if you're close enough. And if you've ever shot a weapon at night, oftentimes you'll see a big flame come out. You can even get flamethrower charges for shotguns. So in reality, a shotgun could set gas on fire. But when that trail hits the car, in reality, what it looked like is one big woof. But in this scene, what we see appears to be multiple charges firing.
What you're seeing here is a very clever combination of several different shots and materials to create the effect that we want, namely this apparent chain reaction. We see the close-up of the shotgun strike on the trail of flammable liquid, and that's a surprisingly difficult effect to do, just because it's very susceptible to wind, temperature conditions, and everything else to make it reliable. And they need it to be reliable because they've got a camera movement on it. So my guess is that they used some sort of spark charge off to the side so as to create the appearance that the shotgun blast was igniting it. They also seem to have used a different flammable liquid. There's very little smoke, but you look at the wider shot, it burns like gasoline. So then we cut, we reset, we put the explosives in the vehicle, we get Nicolas Cage in the front, and we pour out some gasoline to make the trail, manually light it, and while it's burning there, we set it up so that it doesn't burn into the charges that we've set, because of course we don't want them damaged. They're triggered electrically and they're triggered in sequence, so that first you see the small explosion out to the side, and just when you think you've seen the full effect, suddenly you get the larger explosion in the background, which is great because you get something that builds visually and thus helps to sell the idea that he is one hell of a badass. So you can see how the smoke looks white, which is a signature of black powder. If you don't mind that white smoke, it looks great. But if you do, then you probably want to use something other than black powder. Possibly a high explosive, which is mainly force and very little visual impact. That way you could add your own smoke if you needed to, chemically or mechanically. Hurt Locker.
Nice and hot in here. Okay, the debts are good. Laying on the charge. Nice and sweet. Good to go.
Butcher shop, 2 o'clock. Dude has a phone. Put it down. Put down the phone.
Come on, guys, talk to me.
I can't get a shot.
What we're seeing is an ordnance disposal team in a war scenario trying to dispose of an improvised explosive device, and it doesn't go as planned.
They've decided they're going to blow it in place. It's going to be too dangerous to defuse or take out, so they're going to put another explosive charge on it to sympathetically detonate it.
Looks like we're gonna need a charge. Oh, I got that. Figured 4 blocks. That'll give us about 20 pounds of bang total.
In the scene, they say they've got 20 pounds of bang there, and bang's a military term for explosives, okay, slang. I don't think there's 20 pounds there. I noticed in the scene they're using civilian detonators rather than military detonators, and I think the reason for this is that, you know, civilian detonators look a hell of a lot more sexy than military ones. Military explosives and military detonators are generally olive drab, OD green. Obviously, the military want to camouflage things. They don't want them too obvious. But in the film industry, you want something that pops for the eye.
An ordinary viewer will not know or appreciate the difference. Though in this film, they were trying to be spot on accurate in a lot of places. So it does surprise me a little bit that they would make that change.
Yeah, that suit looks like the real thing. I get to see one twice a year minimum. These things are immensely heavy. You're talking about 30, 50 pounds there just for the suit, and then you've got the weight of the helmet.
Nice and hot in here.
That's even without any cooling devices on them. This guy's supposed to be in Iraq, and if it's in the summertime, man, he'd be sweltering and sweating inside. And there's only a certain amount of time that you can actually wear them. But yeah, you can run in them. And to actually pass the EOD school, part of it is they lay them on the back and they have to be able to get up onto their feet from that laid back position. And they have to pass that test for physical fitness.
Oh,
I think it's a little bit weird they've got this real rickety cart that they're taking out with, because that's not usually the way the military operates. In this example, they're breaking procedure. They send in the robot. They don't have a problem with the robot. They have a problem with the cart. Should really be sending the robot back in again.
Of course, it advances the plot. If the robot could carry the bomb by itself and do it successfully, there'd be no need for the human to become in jeopardy, which is the whole point of the scene. That's probably something they decided would be a convenient way of creating that scenario.
Nice and sweet.
Hang on, right there. That is wrong. He places the explosives on top 90 degrees out. It's completely in the wrong direction. And what you want to do with explosives is make sure that those plastic explosives are right up against that metal, in contact with it, so it can put the maximum amount of shock into that device and make sure that you actually detonate it. In this direction here, shown in the film, okay, it's teeing on the top of it. So there's only a very, very small amount of that explosive actually touching that metal. So you're not going to get a very good energy transfer. And it's amazing how much a little air gap will stop a heck of a lot of shock.
That is surprising because I'm assuming they had technical advisors on this. You would think would have noticed that.
It looks more sexy this way, right?
Well, no, I don't think it does. I think it's just the wrong choice.
Yeah.
I don't see why this looks any better visually than doing it right would.
Maybe what we're seeing in this movie is not technically correct. You've got to understand that the Special Forces guys are going, no, that's not the way we do it, but we like it that way because ISIS watches these films and they think that's what we do. It's good that they get it wrong in the movies because then it's not intel for unfriendly forces.
The appearance of the explosion is quite good in the sense it looks very jagged and violent, and yet they've added a core of what looks like gasoline or some flammable liquid to make it more visually interesting. You've got our hero in peril, and we get to see not only the explosion, but we also get to see its effects on things like the car body, where the car body is shedding rust and so forth. Really adds dramatically to this sequence. I think I'd approach it by creating some sort of dust that looks like rust, placing it on the vehicle, and then creating a mechanical shock to that vehicle somehow with a pneumatic cylinder. Yeah, or beating with a sledgehammer, maybe, but it's a little bit massive for a sledgehammer.
The old rusted vehicle looks great, but in reality, if you've got an air blast, what will happen is that material will go one way, away from the explosion, and then get sucked back in towards the explosion afterwards.
No Country for Old Men.
Technically, for this to work, there really should not be that much gasoline in the tank of the vehicle because what's going to explode is the gasoline vapors mixed with air. The actual gasoline vapors push the air out, so it's not an explosive mixture inside the tank. So technically, a little far-fetched. If you put a rag down into a gas tank, it would act like a candle, and it would continuously suck up gasoline along that, and that would then be burning on the outside of the vehicle, but you certainly wouldn't get a huge explosion.
Contrary to the popular stereotype, at least most of the filmmakers I've worked with are very conscious of that. They want to make a cool piece of entertainment, not an instruction manual on how to, kill your neighbors or for 16-year-old kids to have accidents or anything like that. So yeah, they will often try to show something that looks like it would work, but really doesn't create the way cool effect that you think it would.
Because they're going to get a lot of backlash if it does work.
And this extends to stunts and a lot of things like that, where they'll try to pick something that looks visually cool, advances the story, but isn't just a huge recipe for disaster. This whole sequence is a nuanced combination of different effects, both in the actual explosion and in the building, all keyed together, and all without overwhelming the dramatic effect of what we're trying to do, which is sell the idea that this is a distraction, not something that is way cool and is supposed to make us believe in the explosion as the main focus of the scene. Breaking the glass is again likely tempered glass broken with detonators to control not only the breakage of it, but the exact timing. You'll notice it does not come as exactly the same time as the car explosion. There's a slight delay, which is good because if you saw the glass break at the same time as the explosion, it would obscure the explosion, which would be stupid.
That glass in the windows falls straight down. But in reality, with an explosion that had a blast wave that would break that glass, would either push the glass into the shop, okay, or it would flex into the shop and then rebound and fall outside, but it would not fall straight down like a waterfall, which is the effect you get when you watch it.
Filmmaking is the art of creating an illusion in the minds and the hearts of the audience. Technical realism only has to be there to the degree that the audience expects it.
And when you're a professional and you're doing it for entertainment, you have to think about the audience.
It's important that the audience believes what you're doing enough to be entertained, and that's what we're striving for.